All right, so let's start from the get-go, tell you what all we've done, then we're going to go through, most of our time is going to be going through this console. So yeah, new speaker system, we have 2 arrays, 5 boxes per side. The coverage is everywhere. That's the goal. So we're trying to cover everything the same. The cave is still the cave. It's an acoustic anomaly, so just know that. You can't fix some things without significant changes. So anyways, the back row and a half of the cave, still it is what it is. So it's stereo rig, full stereo, 120 degree coverage on the boxes. So you're getting a really wide, that's only 120 degrees at the bottom. As the array goes up, we use more narrow waveguides to tighten the coverage pattern a little bit. The stage rack, there's a surface and an engine. The engine does all the thinking. All right, so the surface is a glorified iPad. This can go off, everything still runs. Except for the ports, like what you're connecting to here. You know, you're a little hosed on those inputs. So, but all the processing is done in the engine that's in the side rack over there beside the stage. 128 channels. We're double patching is one of the things we're doing. So we have channels to front of house and then channels for in-ear monitors. I'll go through that more in just a minute. It's the same wireless in-ear monitors and same wireless microphones that were being used, so we just reintegrated those. The in-ear monitors are stereo though, so where you were doing the focus mix before, now they're all stereo. You can do panning and stuff. We'll go through how to change their mix and how to do the pan of their mix in just a minute.
Everyone has a stereo mix.
Yes, to achieve that, the backline, some of the backline are wired. Yeah, but yes. Yep.
Awesome.
There's some future things coming. So a Dante card has not been delivered yet, so that's future expandability. That's digital audio in and out. It gives us 64 channels at 96K. And all Dante patching for that. Then there's also a Wave sound grid card, which is going to enable plugins. That's what this lovely screen that's doing nothing, that's what it's going to be there for. So you're going to get the ability to touch and drag plugins on this screen. So you, just like you see, for instance, on some channels like the, say the 1176 here, you can click and just drag those knobs around for those plugins. So you have what's called D-Pack here on the console, which is like an expansion plugin pack that's built into the processing of the console. And then there's these external plugins. So that Waves corresponds to the external plugins.
Are those Waves effects the same ones that you can just buy on the market?
That's right.
Really sweet.
Yep.
Because being familiar with those is going to be amazing.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And it's kind of the same thing too. Like my go-tos are right here, the 1176, the LA2A. But the verbs, even these are good verbs. But what you can do with like IR Live and HVerb, unbelievable. So anyways, that's where the fun gets to start. Bus compression as well. I like to do bus compression on, I'd throw it through like a Pull Tech and a LA2A as well for a lot of stuff there. So we do have buses built into the console. I'll go through that in just a minute. So we're routing signals into buses and then the bus to the mains. The reason for that is, if you guys are familiar with bus compression, it's really just to kind of do some overall tonal shaping to a group of channels and overall compression to a group of channels. Like the theory in the studio is like, hey, I know I'm going to pull, I'm going to do this scoop sound on all my drums, so why don't I just do it on a group? And then, I can EQ separately on the channel themselves. So that's kind of the theory. Yeah, that's the theory behind it. All right, let's talk about all the areas we're sending audio to. So there's a headphone amp for lights. He gets what's called, it's the production control room mix, PCR. All right, that's on the main outputs. It's a matrix. So they're getting the left-right feed plus comms, or not comms, but talkbacks, the MD talkback. So when MD talkback is talking, it goes into that matrix, going to the lights and to the speakers in the production control room. So they can have bidirectional communication. There's also a media talkback microphone. It's push to talk. So it's hot and active. It's routed to all the ears. Whenever they talk, it goes straight to the ears. We may just want to send that only to the MD. We'll figure that out, however you guys want to do it. But
it's usually what we do, just the MD.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Other outputs. Broadcast output, that's a separate matrix out where they'll have the ability to, right now it's just the left-right feed that's going to that mix, but they'll have the ability to pull up individual channels as they want to.
Yeah, even if you want to pause in the middle of a transition.
All right, let's get started in the console. Any questions on that front? We're mostly using stage connectivity, so for all of the instruments on stage, they're connecting straight to the engine. There's 48 inputs on the engine, 24 outputs. There's a couple things that connect here. There's only 8 ins, 8 outs. So not a whole lot.
Have actively connected to here.
Ooh.
Like on the back of the console, you mean? Like the local
Like
connections?
we used to run the computer into this, right?
Yeah, so we're doing digital audio for the computer. So it's Dante Virtual Sound Card. We have a Dante adapter plugged in here and 2 stereo channels of Dante right now in that rack. So when the Dante card comes in, it'll be all card based and those adapters can come out. But right now that's how we're achieving those.
Yeah, so there's a network cable in the back of this Mac
Got you.
that feeds the audio into there digitally.
That's right.
Having like a stereo plug.
Yeah, 1.8.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about hum or buzz or any of that stuff. It's just digital in, digital out, no conversions. Lovely. The amps are in the cavities. I think you guys may be familiar with them. So there's one behind that rack there, and then there's one on the same side, same place on the opposite side of the stage. So
Far back left and far back right of the stage is where the amps are.
Yep.
Okay.
Subs. There's 4 in the ceiling, flown, and then 2 on each side of the stage.
Yeah, that's new for us. That'll be, and then you can already feel the difference.
Oh yeah, and the subs in the ceiling are plenty impressive. It's just that additional little oomph that you get from subs on the floor. You know, there's something about it.
You can feel the
in
stage
the concrete.
moving.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that,
Like on the stage, you can feel the stage vibrating. It's great.
the feel.
Are these all the same, like feed to all 8 then?
Yeah, it is,
Okay.
and it's all on the subs aux. So the main outputs. Right now, I'm running at about 6 dB down. And I have some attenuation on the DSP too, so there's plenty of headroom off of these speakers, but this is probably going to be a happy living area for the overall level of the space.
Sure.
Do you have different attenuation between the ones that are flown and the ones that are on the floor?
Oh, the subs?
All the same.
Not currently. They're all getting the same feed.
Basically, we built some very
There is attenuation across the boxes though, just high freak shading. So like the box that's like practically covering the front of the stage, that box has a lot of high freak attenuation. So to minimize or eliminate feedback, hopefully not have feedback.
Did you say it also has a minus 12 dB on the bottom set speakers, so the front row doesn't get blasted compared to everyone else?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, so they're upgraded.
That's right.
Okay, nice.
your system.
Yep.
Good idea.
Yeah, because we used to have a problem with that.
Typically,
Yeah.
I keep my house lights on its fader.
Yeah, so it's tuned to be level balanced. Typically, as you walk to the front of a stage, you want it, like naturally you think it should get louder. There's a little bit of that, so it does get slightly louder, but we're able to attenuate the high freak. And it's just the high frequency we want to attenuate, not the low frequency. So the purpose of a line array, the more boxes you put together, the more directivity you get at lower frequencies.
So make the antenna here and not destroy the front row, basically.
Yeah.
Nice.
This is like a crossover,
we had that before.
basically, right?
I'm sorry?
Like a crossover? Frequency?
Yeah, there are crossovers in there. Those are two-way boxes too. So there's low freak and high freak going to both. It's all passive boxes in the ceiling, so all the amps are down here. But yeah. All right, let's go to the console.
And then just had a quick question. What we send to like the online mix, does it also get like the sub frequencies and all that too?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's getting full range. The speakers, the arrays get full range. It's just subs are supplemental.
Oh, okay, so those are full range speakers. Okay, okay.
Because that's the key.
They're extending down to 60 hertz. I'm not pushing too much below 60 to them, but the subs are carrying at 80 and below, so there's a little overlap on that crossover. All right, so console. Let's go back to the home page. It's broken out into two banks of 12, and for the most part, all inputs are on this side and outputs are on this side, just to help kind of keep things simple from a flow perspective, knowing that, hey, when I'm looking for input, I'm going to look over here. When I'm adjusting an output, I'm going over here. All right, so the way the channels are lined up is it's very much one-to-one. There's some things that aren't, like as far as where they're patched in on the actual engine to the channel. But kick, we have a kick in, sub kick out. So that's the 901 right now inside. That's the sub kick, and then the 902 in the sound hole, the kick drum. Snare top mic, snare bottom mic, 3 toms, and an overhead pair. We have 1 bass channel, 2 acoustics, electric.
One slider for the overheads, or do you have 2?
Just 1.
Just one.
And this is, sorry, just a small addition. This is how you bank through all the inputs.
Oh,
Where we used to have those arrows to slide through them all. They're in groups. So every 12, you just cycle through the different banks. Yeah.
Sorry. Do we have the kick and the bass paired again? Or do you have your own kick volume and your own bass volume?
Oh, for subgroup? Yeah, they have their own DCAs.
Good.
Yeah, so you have.
I never liked that.
They're separate now.
Yes, sweet.
So you have independent controller. Good.
We have another group we're not using.
Yeah.
We could put something in there.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Kevin. So yeah, going down to the next group of 12 here. Electric guitars, stereo piano, and the electrics are both stereo as well. And in the event that they're only giving you a mono feed, it's easy to change the width of that. So there's a stereo image down to a mono image, or if we just wanted to make it less wide, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, but anyway, so yeah, if you have somebody come in and plug up only one side, you can
Default to the left side automatically?
the left side's the first channel, the right side's the second, so yeah, it'd probably be left side. But that way you could put them mono and pan them to the right, or pan them however you want. All right, piano is stereo channel, synth is stereo channel, track stereo channel, pad is stereo as well. Then we have vocals, 4 wireless handhelds, 2 wired, and then the belt packs, 4 of those. I'll delete smart. That was just for tuning. And then there's Spotify and 2 video channels, as well as a group for all playback sources. So for instance, Spotify's pre-service music, that's what you're using it for. But if you have a video coming up, you could pull down playback, just have the video queued up, and then you can adjust that level on your main bank there.
There we go. We got some light on the stage.
To control the group instead of the individual channel.
That's right.
That's in the program.
All right, that's all the inputs. Pretty simple.
Okay, so the first 3 banks.
But then the same thing again. This is the double patching thing we were talking about, where it's all the drums again, bass, acoustics. All these are the same. These are all white. So try to make them all the same color so that you can quickly identify that they're in-ear channels. And then all the electric guitars, vocals, and then we have the talkbacks, the clicks, the room mics.
Okay, so banks 1, 2, and 3 are your instruments. Bank 4, 5, and 6 are your
Double
changing
patch.
their packs.
Yeah.
That translates
center just for a while.
Cutoff point.
Typically,
The cutoff point
Yeah.
centered.
Cool.
Well, they all turn white too, so you know you're messing with someone's.
No,
ear.
yeah. Well, I mean,
let's say that puts the tilt value at
Yeah.
130.
So the reason for this
I want to move
is the processing that we're doing here, like the gating and all that stuff. Not so much fun to hear in your ears, especially as a musician. You know, you're wanting raw sounds. You don't want to hear a ton of compression, a ton of EQ shaping, and all that stuff. So here at front of house, you get to do whatever you want to do out here to make it sound good. And then in the in-ear channels, we're really just doing some basic processing, like a little bit of tonal shaping, no compression, no gating. Same thing for the snare, a little bit of tonal shaping. There he goes. A little compression, just enough to be transparent and natural in the ears. So if we need to change, if something sounds like trash in your ears, we can visit it here, but typically we're trying not to do much so that you can tell if it sounds like trash, then you're probably sending trash, that type of thing. So
Yeah, Joe's gonna love that.
Yeah.
She was always fighting with compressors on the vocals.
oh yeah, I bet.
Because it would just cut off in her ears, when she would sing high. And it was like,
in a
now we have control over that. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Insane.
and that's the same thing with vocals. Like what we would do for a vocal, for instance, I mean, really just a high pass and call it a day. If we need to, like if vocals are complaining about vocals being muddy, we may pull a little bit of like that 200 hertz and maybe another pull at like 400 hertz or something like that. Just a little bit of light pulling the low mid frequency, but for the most part, we want that to be natural so that they can work proximity effect, in their ears. So yeah, we'll just throw a high pass at 80 hertz, and then we'll copy. One of the best buttons here. We'll go into this in more detail, but we're going to copy just this EQ or just the high pass, and then we'll paste it to these channels. Yeah, so now as we go to those, we see that same high pass there. When we go to the next channel, it's not there. So we're going to paste, select, paste, select. You can do that per every parameter.
And not to interrupt your flow, but can you fit this in sometime? Give us like, if it sounds boxy, pull 500 out. If it sounds muddy, pull 200 out. Can you give us those kind of?
Generally EQ.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk through some of that. Yeah, man. Cool. So while we're on inputs, let's go ahead and talk through the flow on the screen. So we'll go back to kick in. That's a good one. So the tabs across the top, you can touch anything here. There's many ways to do many things. The bank tab shows you all the channels in a strip view. So like you can see all the processing for every channel in this group of 12. So if I'm mixing live, typically I'm kind of looking at this, just so I can see a little bit of everything that's going on. But you can also, here on the input channel, this little red indicator here is gate. This indicator is compression. And then there's the meter indicator. So you have all that right here on the channels as well.
So red is gates closed, basically.
Also, if you're on this page, you can go straight to whatever you want by clicking on it. So if you want to go to the EQ, you can click on it there. There's a couple of different EQ views. So you can toggle through those by the view. There's this view across the bottom, which has a RTA built in. Whatever is soloed is what you're looking at in the RTA. I think the last thing we were looking at was the overall drum bus.
Yeah, I think the mains were soloed.
Oh, okay.
When we solo, that's only in the headphone mix. It doesn't actually solo in the house, does it?
Correct. Yeah, it's not a solo in place. We can integrate a solo in place function if you'd like. There's different. It is dangerous, and that there's different theories on that too, because I've mixed places where their guys are religious about it, and that's great because you can be really granular and you hear things in the house. But like to solo in place in the middle of rehearsal, really kind of annoying to the band, because it's like, hey, I lost all my feel for the room, like all the energy that's happening from the speakers. I lost it because you're soloing a guitar, or a vocal or something like that. So virtual sound check is going to be a big thing. When the Waves card comes in, you can track all that stuff. Come back in here on your own time in an empty room and just spend as much time as you want on channel by channel and just toy through those. Then solo in place will be a big deal. All right, so overview shows the processing that's being done on just the channel you have selected.
Sorry, if I'm in your way again.
All right. Also on this page, we can click on anything to get to it. So if we wanted to go straight to the gate, we can click here or we can click here. So we can tap that, or if I want to go to the compressor, I could tap that. So that's a quick way. If I want to go to the EQ, I can tap that.
I have a question on gating.
Yep.
So there's two drummers, actually three with Corey. Me and it's actually his son. We tend to hit very differently.
Sure.
Is it easy to actually save different gate settings for like two different drummers?
Absolutely. Here's the way I address that as a front of house guy though. Is if I have a softer player, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in first thing I'm going to do is just come in and reset my faders to unity, and then I'm going to use that.
With a unity button?
Yeah.
And then when you flick the bottom, it resets it to unity.
That's right. So then based off of that, I'll set gain based off of loudness. So if he's playing softer, then I'm going to gain that up a little.
Okay.
And that way the gate settings apply to different
you basically
loudness.
signal conditioned it already. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You bring
makes
him
sense,
up to the point where he hits the gate the same as you do. Is that what sort of
Change the input, not the.
Exactly.
Hit the cue and hit
Exactly. And plus that fixes it for like in-ear level and everything.
Oh, that's
Okay.
great.
This is something I want
That's
to
so good.
So if you think about
Such good information.
And Q2.
Yeah, no doubt. It's because there's different ways to do gain as well, and there's a lot of going back and forth on that because like the traditional studio way of doing gain is take it to clipping, back it down, just where you have enough, you're below the threshold of where you may peak the input. But that way you're getting the most analog signal into your signal path, and then you adjust everything down the stream from there. That's great, and that's fantastic. And that's an analog way of thinking. Because used to be noise was a big deal. So you wanted to get the absolute cleanest components on the front end, the cleanest signals, and then slam everything from that point on. Well, digital processing kind of changed everything. If I were to bring you in here and have gains set at like 20% less than what they are right now, and just push the faders 20% more, and adjust all my processing to account for it, you wouldn't tell the difference. The noise floor is not, it's no longer an issue. It's no issue. So if I set gain based off of loudness, what I mean by that is if I set the fader and then I adjust the gain to where it's the right level, and then I'll leave it alone from that point on. I don't want to adjust anymore because then it affects everybody's ears after that. But if I adjust it that way, then it fixes it in everybody's mix. And it fixes it to my compressors or my gates. So that way I found works really well in today's way of mixing, especially church mixing. So.
And just to clarify, when you're talking about gain, you're talking about input gain.
That's right.
Leaving that, set that, and then your faders or your volume.
Absolutely. I'm mixing on faders after I set my initial gain. And I want to be done with gain within like the first, song. Like if we do a run through, I need to be done. That is the very first thing that I do. And I set it, I'm done with it, never touch it again. Unless, somebody changes an input condition, like it takes off a pad or something like that.
If say we gain the snare up, will that then change the gain for everyone's in-ears as well? It will, okay.
It sure does.
Okay.
So it makes sense.
Gain does cross into the in-ears.
That's
So
right.
get a good static mix with your gain levels, and then tweak with the fader.
Yeah, that's I think something just mindfulness. I know a challenge for me in the past was always I always felt like I couldn't turn the drums up loud enough, but I could barely turn up other instruments, and it's like destroying my in-ears. Like an acoustic guitar, say for example. In my mind, I'm like, this shouldn't be, but I guess that'd be gain.
See,
right?
absolutely, crest factor comes into play. So what that is it's the compression of the signal. So how consistent the signal is. Like think about a keys source. When keys come in and play, if I were to gain that up to like right before clipping and push the fader up, like I'd only be able to push the fader like that high. It's already very compressed. So if I compress based off of meter, then that's lying to me, kind of. But if a snare drum, if I compress, like if I gain that the same metering as I gain the keyboard, I'm never going to hear the snare.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. It's a very dynamic signal, right? I'm looking at, like, you know, even in use case, like as you're playing in a set, I'm still looking at 12 to say 18 dB of dynamic range from a snare drum, whereas a key is going to give me like maybe 3 to 6 dB of dynamic range.
Cool.
Right? So if your ear perceives that as loudness. So if I take that gain and I adjust it based off of what my ear hears and fits it into the mix, so if I set that gain based off of the loudness, then you're going to see the meter is like maybe 20% of what a snare drum would be. Same thing with vocals. I'm going to be pushing vocals pretty darn hard into the preamp because they're very, very dynamic as well. Like 20 dB of dynamic range is absolutely normal for a vocal. So anyways, that's my theory. Do what works for you, but what I found is that works really well when people don't have to change their in-ear mixes a ton for different players. So you're able to stay pretty baseline. And then what I'm starting to see at that point is my in-ear mixes, they start to look like this. They start to look pretty flat. They're not like all over the place because I fixed that with gain. So
Yeah, you look at our iPads for our mixes, it is. It's
all over.
You know, yeah, it's crazy. But get that right, and everything else will be right. Cool.
It follows down the path. Yep. All right. So moving down the line, there's the preamp tab. This is everything to do with the preamp socket. This is where we change phantom power. We put a pad on it. There's a recall button, so to recall everything about a channel. You can save that feature. We'll get into those settings in a minute. Then there's trim. There's overall gain, then there's trim, two different things. Digital trim only affects the channel. Gain affects the preamp. So since we're double patching, say that kick signal is going to channel number 1 and channel 65. So if I'm like, hey, you know, this kick is still killing me, I may need to make a gain adjustment, but more so before I do that, I can adjust trim to just fix my channel.
It's kind of like
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you say the difference between gain and trim again? Because I was wondering that too. You're saying trim only affects the
That's right.
channel and not both.
That's right. Yeah, so gain affects the preamp and the engine. So that's all the analog amplification on that input.
Pushes the signal overall.
Yeah. It changes right there at the input, whereas trim, it just takes it after that and only affects it for your channel.
What's the difference in trim and fader then?
Not much.
Not much, because
They're kind of the same thing.
If they're like, man, my in-ear, the kick is killing me.
So
You could pull down the trim or you could pull down the fader in their mix, right?
So you'll see this, yeah, like going back to that gain conversation, the faders are logarithmic, right? So there's in the fader here, this is 5 dB of grouping, 5 dB of range there, but right here, that's 10 dB of range. All right, and then as I get lower, it's more logarithmic. So it's even more. If I'm trying to mix on faders down here, I'm like making that kind of change is the same as making this kind of change, right? So I want my faders to be in the sweet spot. All right, so what people would do a lot of times is they would set their gain where they would go to clipping or they'd be in nominal level, and then they would do input trim to get their gain, their fader back at unity.
By keeping them still in that sweet spot. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Okay.
Again, going back to the digital world, no need for that. I just set gain lower and call it a day. And plus that fixes it for my in-ear channels and everything. So I like to keep my input trims at unity if I can. But digital inputs, for instance, like our Dante inputs here for video, they don't have gain. All they have is digital trim. So I have to fix it here.
Because it's a line level? Or?
It's just, it's ones and zeros. So it comes into the console at that level, and there's nothing you can do about it in an analog world. So yeah, we're just digitally attenuating that channel. All right, moving across, there's the filter page. Pass filter, low pass filter. You can also adjust the high pass and low pass filters here on the EQ page. So once they're in place, you can grab that high pass filter and low pass filter.
Let's say we want to point it all the way down there.
So this, a lot of times the EQ page is the quickest way to make the change for most everything. But if it's not on, you have to go to the filter page in order to turn it on.
I'm going to go set, like that, and then
All right, gate,
whether you use this
basic gate settings. There's a couple different things here. There's gates, there's expanders. Those are the two that I go in between. To change it to an expander, you go into the library, and you can choose, say, dual expander, which is 2 stages of expanding, and then source expander is just 1. So what that looks like, it's a different look altogether. I have that on some of the mics. It's pretty simple. There's a threshold, so that as soon as the signal exceeds that threshold, it opens up the expander. And then the depth is when it's below that threshold, how many dB is it going to grab? But the difference between an expander and a gate is an expander is a slope, if you will. So let me go, I'll go back to a gate. A gate, if you're below the threshold, it's a brick wall. So it's on off, like tick tick, on off. An expander is a variable setting. So like it's like a backwards compressor, if you will. You don't hear it grab and let go. You hear it clamp down. So it's like a gradual grab. Yeah, it's a gradual grab.
When would you use an expander and when would you use a gate?
Okay.
What's the, like, I need to use this instead of this?
So gates I'll use in any time that I don't mind that grab being heard. And those, for instance, for that is like if I'm using it as a noise gate. Sometimes I still may plan to use an expander, and that's fine. But like, say, any noise that I'm getting from instruments right now, if I had a high noise floor, which I don't, everything's wide open, and I don't have any noise at all. But let's see, bass is one of those that maybe.
So these are soft
no, it's still quiet. All right, there we go. So here's a for instance where I can gate it.
These 4 obviously correspond to those 4 top 2. These 2 come over.
There's something else that's that loud. Let's just do the bass.
And so you notice, like,
If I turn the volume of the bass up,
and
there'll
that
be
says
a
default.
buzz from the
So I can
lights.
scroll maybe.
Okay, well, yeah, a gate is how you can kind of defeat that too.
Because there, I'm scrolling the window. You can see there.
Oh, I bet it's keys.
The cursor moving. If it's got a word down at the bottom. Like
No.
The button.
No.
I'm doing something there. I'm changing. Basically, what I'm changing.
It's
what-
interesting. Who's noisy?
Will the RTA reveal it?
Okay.
No, it's too low. Yeah, it's like it doesn't even register yet.
Macro column over there, which is the last column that we're looking at in the spreadsheet.
Oh, maybe.
Macros are obviously.
Oh, there we go. Well, overhead. I'd never gate an overhead, but
Okay.
here's
You could build.
an example of how
On
the
this
difference in
console,
sound.
macros super helpful. They're
So a gate
if you've got
grabs and lets go.
especially granulate.
We've had to do that before for
Right there. That's okay. All right.
for yeah, just noisy.
Also,
I had it
almost
with the
every
bass at one
screen
point
you're
because the
looking at-
bass was really like humming like crazy.
And it helped a lot.
If you're ever looking for something like, hey, I know this should be there somewhere, look up there. When I go into the setup or the.
All right, so there,
That changes based on what screen I'm in.
that's the gate
Program
grabbing.
and the output.
It's just an infinite grab. An expander,
Yeah, Q stack.
this isn't a good example because it's not making any noise, but I'll show you the difference. Library, source expander, recall.
Any window, anywhere here, anywhere up here, you can make them different sizes. You notice this little, the X would close this window. So all of these windows are open, so we're just going to close all of them. There's nothing there now. But if I want to look at the Q stack, I'm going to hit the Q stack, and by default it puts it.
It's not a good explanation, but anyways, you'll see that there's an angle, so it gradually lets go of the signal. So, anyways,
Do we have any expanders on right now with our setup?
just on the vocals.
Okay.
This is internal. You can actually
All right.
have 2 more. That way the vocals don't have a hard cutoff.
That's right.
We need to change that. Oh, it's off anyway. Never mind. There's no compressor on. Or do we need to change the overheads back to anything, or there's?
I just turned it off.
Oh, okay, got it.
Anyway.
If I ever were to try and cut noise on those, I'd probably use an expander. I just have a super low threshold
That's kind of a
so that as soon as there's anything happening in there,
That's where
then it's cutting it off. If I were to set something that's like maybe I'm trying to set up like like if there's a squeak or whatever that's coming from the drum throne, you know, as you're moving around, or you're, you know, picking your sticks up, that kind of thing, maybe I'm trying to cut that stuff out, but not anything that's happening from the cymbals. That may be the only reason why I use an expander.
Pedal squeak.
Like
That's a real thing.
Cymbal, you want
Bottom.
the delay of the cymbal to not get and just all of a sudden get cut off.
So this is what I'm seeing
Expander
on
be
my
used the same way.
You could.
I'm
You
not
absolutely,
using expanders.
you absolutely could.
Okay.
You have to
It's
get
a
pretty.
gentle, gradual.
You could use it that way for sure. I've never tried it, but yeah, it could work. So, all right, moving on down. That's gates. Compressors, the same thing. So you have some special compressors, then you have the normal compressor. Here's just a normal compressor. It just looks like this. You have your what you're used to seeing, I think. So your threshold, your ratio, your makeup gain. It shows the makeup gain by that little space between the little blue line and the blue faded in signal. This is a manual peak compressor. The difference between a peak and an RMS compressor. So an RMS, root mean square, that's the average of the signal. More effective on signals with higher crest factor, like keys, for instance. So that RMS compressor is going to work a little bit better. But for, say, drums, I want that transient to be compressed. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to use a peak compressor. There's manual peak, manual RMS. And then there's special compressors. Let's go to another channel that I don't need it on. So like this guy. We'll go to library, and if we wanted to put like want a special compressor on it, we just can recall that here in the library. Optronic, that's the LA2A recall. And then it brings this in with the different functions. These are kind of noisy, so be wary. If you have a bunch of these and you start pushing this gain, you're going to get some hiss. It's just the nature of how it works.
Like on a vocal channel?
Kind of.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah, so there's multiband compression built into the D-Pack. So that would be a way of stacking. You could have multiband and regular compression, or you can use your group. So you can compress on the channel and compress on the group. All right, we're gonna go take this back out. We're just gonna go to a manual peak. Just so you can see some of the different ones, like there's a bus compressor. I think this one here, the Mighty, that one's supposed to be modeled after the old DBX, I believe.
Okay.
Then there is a, nope, that's the old DBX. Only ones I use, if I go into a special compressor, are the LA2A. This one's just a really smooth compressor. You can bury the signal and it's really transparent. If you want something to come forward in the mix, I like the 76, because it's really like an op amp type compressor. This is not tube stage, whereas the LA2A is supposed to be a tube. Anyways, this one, you can boost the input, take the output down, or even if you just wanted to slam something, you could leave the output up and boost the input, and it's just a lot of added gain. But the thing that I would be wary of there is always turn it on and off. Like if you ever start going crazy on a compressor, A/B it. Yeah, because sometimes you'll find yourself where you're like, hey, with my compressor engaged, the signal is 6 to 9 dB louder than when it's not. That's going to mess up your gain staging going forward. Right? So you always want to kind of A/B as you're making changes. Make sure it's doing what you want it to do.
And the level shouldn't change. It shouldn't jump, right?
That's right.
It should be the same.
The low level stuff should come up and the high level stuff should come down, but overall, if it's in a normal volume, it should be about the same between turning it on and off. All right, library. We'll go back to peak and leave that alone, turn it off. That's on an in-ear monitor channel, so I don't care about it. I don't want to compress that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, next, inserts. So this is where on insert A or B,
Controlled from the console, but then
I can do
turn the console on, boot it up,
additional mix racks. We'll get into this in a minute, or a Dyne 8. The Dyne 8 I'm still on the kick. Okay, cool. So it's dynate number 1. We'll apply, and then here, it's inside the insert of this channel. We have the multiband compressor. So there's a 4-band multiband. Then there's a dynamic EQ. Purpose of a dynamic EQ is if it's very much the same as a multiband, except for think more additive.
It's like a compressing EQ, right?
Well,
It looks for frequencies and then.
exactly.
Yeah.
And what it can do as well is it can add, say if I have a female vocal, typically a female vocal where it's like already a pretty scoop sound, where they have low frequency and they have high frequency, but they don't have much mid-range. Well, I can do a dynamic EQ. When they give me so many dB of high freak, I can give back mid freak, and it actually boosts mid freak when I get high freak.
Can you use it as a de-esser too?
Oh,
It's really super.
for sure. And so the dynate's where we want to hang out for that. We'll just take this. You can do EQ on that as well. Let's just take the overall level, the threshold. So we can bury the threshold for the high frequency, change the crossover point at which it's burying that. So if the S's are like 6K and above, yep, and just take that threshold down and then change the ratio and then pretty much have a de-esser. I'd recommend to use this for vocals for now, and that's about it until you get used to it. It's the easiest and most effective to use on vocals. Typically, like for a vocal that's when in their low range and their quiet range, they're just all bassy and stuff, then yeah, pretty much just bring the threshold to where it works. When they're low frequency intensive, it still lets the high freak come through, but then it's compressing the low freak. And then as they start like really belting in the microphone, it's just shrill. Well, then they actually start getting into the high freak. So then we want to just tailor those frequencies, like, hey, they're only shrill in the high mids. So that's it right there. But when they're singing quiet, they're not engaging that compressor, because that's frequent. That's stuff that I need. That's information that I need when they're singing quiet. But
I can see us using something like that for like really unique voices, like Sonny and Kim, and then
Exactly. So I'm just
maybe Mariah.
you're good now.
Why is it smoking?
Just kidding.
You let the smoke out.
Like even
Michaela's S.
Michaela's high end, and then Chris's, because Chris has
Yeah, it was.
very low singing, and yeah, like
All right, so that's multiband compression. We'll get into a little bit more of that in, say, sound check or whatnot. I may help dial in some of those from the get-go, and you can see how I'm using them. It's a game changer for vocals. Absolutely must have for vocals, in my opinion. So we'll figure out how to, but you can get yourself in a lot of trouble too. So
Yeah, you gotta be careful, especially you don't want to turn the de-esser into a listing.
So what we'll do for now is just we'll take the threshold and reset. We'll just reset it back to default values. But if the thresholds are a 0, they're not doing anything. Well, they are. They're engaging at 0, but we're probably not going to hit them. You can also do EQing from this or whatnot, but I recommend doing your EQ on your EQ, and then you can use the dynate before your EQ or after your EQ and compression. So you can put it on either insert point. I typically run it before, but you can try to. So the reason why I do that is I can tonally fix what's happening with the vocal before I EQ it. And then, because again, going back to the vocal example, if they're singing quiet, they're bassy. But if they're belting, they're trebly. They're really harsh and piercing. I want to fix that before I do anything with the EQ, right? So I can smooth that stuff out a little bit. Then I can EQ for their voice to balance them out, make them sound natural. And then after that, I can compress that signal to fit in my little dynamic range of where I need them in the mix.
You haven't taken anything out.
You can also just disable those.
So you could just have just the high frequency, right?
Yeah,
Or just the mids. Okay.
for sure. All right, moving on. Insert B, same thing if you wanted to put the insert there. Delay, you can do delay per channel. Not that you need to, but you have it. All right, so that's channels, everything about the channel and how we affect that channel. These knobs, let's go over these real quick. So these correspond with the EQ right here.
Let's say I want a group that's
These knobs correspond with what's going on right here on the side. So you can change these. Right now they're set up to be the first couple of settings for the gate and compressor, and then the second couple of adjustments for the gate and compressor, and then the third couple of settings.
virtual keyboard on the touch or that keyboard.
So they change and you can see what they're doing. Once you get used to those, they can be pretty effective. I'm a touch and grab type of guy, so I just like go straight to where it's at. I take that and then I'll just adjust it, or I'll just grab it with my finger. So anything that you touch and highlight goes down to the touch and turn knob. Highlights it yellow just so you can kind of color code it.
That's weird because the return was working for me yesterday.
All right, there are setup functions. You don't need to worry about this so much, but this is where we can change channel specific options, what this looks like, what these are. For instance, we can put the EQ before the compressor or compressor before the EQ, and then we can change it globally as well, so just per a channel, if we needed an EQ before we compress or vice versa. All right, this.
What is it set up for default? EQ before compression or compression?
It's EQ before compression.
And then wherever you want that group to go.
And all right, so I don't want to go too. There's a couple. The setup knob. I guess I'll explain. The setup knob has different functions for different things on the screen. So, like for the EQ, right now it locks you into the input full range. Let me show you what that means. So for the low frequency, for instance, it's at 64, so I'll put it back. But it only lets me go up to 200 hertz with the low freak. It wants to keep it in my, like in the low freak area. All right. How many of you have walked into somebody's mix and like you go to adjust the high mids and it's somewhere in the lows, right? Somebody just they went.
Because they didn't know what they're doing, obviously, right?
Yeah, they went hunting and pecking. So this right now locks you into that. But if you were to do enable input full range, now I can take that wherever I want. For now, I'm just going to leave that set up to not full range, and we're going to put it back at 64.
I just want them on white, pointing straight up. Okay. So they're in position.
All right. So specific things you can change there. Library is a per function thing too. So you can save EQ libraries per channel.
Right now,
you can save the entire channel. So if I go to overview, library,
so now go look at your
I save everything about that channel. So if I had, say, I guess Mariah on a vocal mic, and I really like the settings that I had for her, then I would go to the overview. So it's everything about that channel.
Basic channel script, right?
Yep. And then I can either save it in the library function here,
all right, now
or this button here.
I want you to take the odd rails.
Nice.
And then when it comes time to recall her settings again, I can just go to that channel, library, recall. Mariah would be in that list.
Super sweet.
Insert. You can turn it on and off real quick there.
Take the even rails.
All right, we've discussed every button. Ends. This is the on-off for these features. So like compressor, if I wanted to quickly turn it on or off, that just turns it on and off.
It might just work similar, the same vibe. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. So you can do at full enter, you can do at one.
All right, let's go through these real quick. So there's the name.
Most of the time, we turn a picture on.
That displays the name on the channel strips. dB shows the level of the fader. Don't know why you'd need that.
So like views.
Yeah, exactly. It just changes what these strips are showing. The I/O shows what's patched.
Oh, that's the best.
Yep.
I had no idea.
So
you could do that.
that's rack input 1, rack input 2.
But if you hit add, a tens number, it's going to go to that 10.
Sorry.
So if you hit at 7,
That's good.
How many times when we look for things like, I don't know what it's
Yep.
routed to.
And even rack 36, you can see where it starts getting squirrely down there.
those are defaults. I created these color presets.
All right, then if you forget what channel it is actually on the console, because any channel can be put anywhere on this console. I could put an input over there if I wanted to. We can do channel, and it displays the channel number. So you're,
Another game changer for us.
yeah.
The picture, and what you want
For the most part, you're just looking
IO
on.
is where it's on the
you don't like
box,
that blue, you want it
and
to
channel is
blue,
where
makes it
it's
blue.
connected on the board.
So you
That's
save over that one.
yeah. It's processing channel.
Yeah.
So there's 128 total processing channels.
Which input it's assigned to on the board.
That's right. Yeah, the I/O is the input on the. Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing. All right, these guys. So that's gain. It changes the rotary functions all the way across the board, both sides. Gains, pan, one. Let's make that high pass real quick. We're gonna go into surface.
So
Yep.
remember, after you record a key, what do you need to do?
That's right.
Sorry, you just said this, but I'm just verifying
And
that
push the fader up.
these buttons change the function of these knobs.
That's right.
Okay.
And
Let's make this one the high pass filter.
again, by default,
So we're gonna control.
activate that.
This is
We're going to see what you just. There's your beautiful picture right there.
Can you say, you're talking about the play button?
surface preference rotaries. Custom rotary 1. We want to be high pass filter frequency.
And if you hit layout 2, you'd see it.
Beautiful. All right. So now it's showing frequency in hertz of the high pass filters, if we have that.
Another cue. Let's build a second.
So in flow,
In the second cue,
if I'm working through a rehearsal, first thing I'm doing, gain. Second thing, I may do pans real quick. Third thing, just to clean up the signal, let's bring all my high passes where they need to be.
And do you subscribe to the general 80 across the board except for low kick and bass?
I don't hate that. I like to get some low.
That's a starting point.
Yeah, that's not a bad spot.
Fast forward.
Vocals, I'll typically bring up, like in this space, in this room, I think we're going to live around 140 to 160. Keys, I heard some pretty darn good stuff in the low freak there, so I bumped that bad boy down to 30.
30, okay.
I'm going to get some subsense stuff out of that, and I'm just going to feel it.
Because now we have it.
Yeah.
We didn't have it before.
Yeah.
So,
Our range was so squished and limited before.
Yeah.
and let's put them in.
So I subscribe a little bit to the 80, and that it helps clean up the ears and stuff like that too. So on their in-ear channels. Alrighty. We have subs send is already configured here, so I put a little label on that one. So it's an easy way to change how much of these channels is going to the subs.
Watch position. Let's also put them in the
what
stage
do we
watch
have routed to the subs?
So what that's going to do, these are a couple presets I've already built for you. And what that actually
That so the 3 different kicks.
when you hit the stage wash,
We have the toms
that's going to adjust the focus, the frost,
and the bass right now, and then there's some. I threw a little bit of the trackpad
So hit the stage wash.
and then the synth in there.
Okay, yeah.
The fixtures softened out.
good to know,
Spread out
yeah.
a little bit. They're not spilling on the screen.
Showing
It's
how
not
you
like
actually-
understanding the corners are still.
Yeah, so I went ahead and created a quick button for it too. It's called Subs Aux,
Intentional.
and that just brings
Say some things now. But
sends on faders for the subs.
Okay, so if you need to make a quick
I'll go
adjustment.
through what all of those things are.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's quicker to adjust a lot of things to the subs at one time doing that. But typically my workflow is, if I'm dialing in the EQ, say for the tom, then I'm just going to go straight to the sub send, and I'm going to dial it up in the subs until I feel like it's right,
And have more features than any other light.
and then I'll go back to gain.
And
All right,
like the features that you're used
we'll get into those in a minute.
They have gobos. They have
We'll talk about those in a little bit. Copy paste. I think we talked a little bit about this. Oh, sorry, I skipped a button. Listen, one of the best buttons. All right, so
they have
one of the coolest features about this console is you can listen to the signal at any point in the chain.
these have controllable
Right. So if you push and hold to listen,
blades or the shakers.
then choose. I want to listen to my high and low pass filters. So I'm listening to the signal up to that point.
It has color mixing.
Wow.
So you can hear what you're doing, what you're. Yes.
And is it hearing it in the house or in your headphones?
Headphones.
Just cans. Okay.
It's like
Do you have to solo it to do that feature?
2700.
It kind of does for you.
it's like a focusing solo.
Got it.
4100.
Yeah, so there's PAFO clear. I get pretty used to just clearing out my mix and then listen to high pass filter.
Oh, this clears all your solos. Sweet. Okay.
You're more like 3000 in the house.
That's right.
Okay.
Um,
But
So
I
that
like just a
function for
little bit
listening
of
only works
separation to
because
get
you've
some
selected the channel
but
and
it's
you're
not
listening
drastically
to the
different
rack.
where it feels like it's a
yeah, so
It's like a secondary solo button, but it's
Let's
part of this. You're soloing it part of the chain.
that's right. So if we're looking at the banks, for instance, we have lots of options.
Wow.
We can listen to any channel at any point of any of those pick points.
So you can, on a vocal, you can listen to just what you're doing on a delay to change the delay times or something like that. I'm
For sure.
they have a tap tempo over, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, very cool.
Yep.
So now,
Handy feature. It's not used all that often, but it's really nice to have when you need it.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, if I'm soloing, I'm just going to go straight to the channel and listen through everything I'm doing and trying to remember what I'm doing to counter effect different things. But if you're like, man, I'm really struggling, I'm doing something that's fighting against itself, then I'll go to that channel and just start listening down the line. Okay, here's what it says to listen at the preamp. All right, now let's listen to the trim. Now let's listen to the gate.
If you're troubleshooting a problem, that's awesome to isolate. Like
Yep.
that. Yeah.
And then we'll just clear it out.
that's the same thing as even tapping next door. So when
Cool.
I'm
We've covered the whole left side of the console. No, we haven't. Copy paste. We talked about what reset does to the faders. So you can go down or up. It just resets it to unity or to negative infinity.
So I'm going to hit color.
So as you're coming in, the first thing you do to just set all your faders to unity so you can get gains. Super easy. I mean, you came in and the mix was like that or whatever. Just really got out of control. And then you can just come back and fix that back where you need it, and you're rocking and rolling. All right, you can also reset any parameter. So if you just want to start from scratch again on an EQ, instead of having to go to each thing and dial it back to where it was, we'll just reset, EQ, go. So you see you can reset that EQ on the channel you have selected. So right now it'd be Tom 3. And it would be resetting EQ or compressor, gate, whatever. Or I can do that. This is the bank view, so I can see all the channels.
Color positions.
All right.
Or intensity.
Is there an
And if I
view?
don't
So
see
like,
it, then I
if you
can
if you tap the wrong thing, like, whoops, I want to go back. There's not. So that's a good.
be
That's
careful.
Yeah. Okay, that's very good to know.
Copy paste. So copy works the same way. You can copy any parameter. You can copy an entire channel. You can copy an entire mix and paste it to that same parameter for another channel.
So if you like Mariah's vocal mix and there's another vocalist that's pretty much the same, you can just copy her.
Yeah, and here's what we did to start, just setting up the consoles. We said, here's a good default, default EQ. I'm at least just going to put my points where I know I need them. I'm going to go ahead and turn on a compressor, and that's about it. I'm going to start with an expander. I like that. Copy, select, paste, and then I'm going to throw that on all the vocals.
He just went down. He went to the bank view, went down all the vocalists, went paste, and they all got the same starting point.
When you have
Yeah, that's awesome.
color temperature, this filter is engaged.
All right, so toms as well. Like I started with the first tom, did my general things, copy and pasted, and fixed the EQ. Because for the most part, my compressor and gate is similar. At least gets me in the start. Yeah, exactly. Here's the headphone jack, just in case you didn't know. All right. We know what these buttons do. We know what everything on this side of the console does.